Hi, Kara.
Yeah.
Different from the usual. Unfortunately, Son of the Times had to go and get checked for the virus today and had to be quarantined for about a week. So we're not going to give up the good fight, though, just because of that.
Nope.
How are you
Fine.
today?
I'm great. Busy as always. So much stuff going on. Just, you know, head down, full speed ahead.
So we've been talking. We did that first podcast, and then we were talking afterwards. And so what I learned, and I think that a lot of people need to learn, is there's just not one type of human trafficking, and specifically human sexual trafficking. It comes in very different forms,
Right.
and I want you to tell us about that.
Okay, well, I can go down a list of different things. There's, starting with sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, child molestation, child rape, going into sex trafficking, organ harvesting, which is encompassed really under the human trafficking umbrella. And then forced prostitution. There's also survival prostitution as well for women especially, and then a lot of teenage girls that use their body as a form of survival, and that's one thing that's there as well. There are different types of things that fall under the sex trafficking. People using mind control, MK Ultra. There's grooming that's involved on many different levels. Grooming, as far as grooming someone thinking that there's a grown man or woman posing to be a teenager or a friend, and then they groom them thinking that they're getting into a relationship with them or a friendship, and then that's when they schedule a time to meet up with them after they've gained their trust, and they sexually abuse them or abduct them, in other circumstances. There's satanic ritual abuse. There's satanic child sacrifice. There's an entire book on satanic rituals. So I've heard multiple different stories of different types of satanic ritual abuse. There isn't just one, and a while back, I thought that was just one thing, satanic ritual abuse, that there's one thing that can happen. They follow this one ritual, but that's not the case. There's an entire book full of different types of rituals, sexual rituals, torture rituals, sacrificial rituals, cannibalistic rituals, ones that combine multiple ones that I just mentioned. There are different types of torture that are associated with that, but then there's also just general torture. A lot of times that's one of the trauma bonding techniques, going into a psychological standpoint of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, but torture, murder, bestiality, a lot of this stuff that they do is actually documented and recorded. It could be for blackmail reasons, for evidence, but then it could also be to take that child sexual abuse material and then sell it on the dark web, or transfer that material to other places where they're actually going to be making a profit from it. And so all of those make up what sex trafficking is. So, like I mentioned before, there are so many different tactics that these predators and traffickers will use to obtain these children, and many different circumstances. And I know that a lot of people know that in the social care system, foster care, orphanages, there is a very, very high percentage of sexual violence and sexual abuse that happens there. There is a very high percentage of victims of sex trafficking that come from those areas, lower economic areas as well. I know that a lot of people do know that, throughout the world, a lot of the places that are, impoverished countries and areas that don't have the economic, stability that, say, we do in the United States, are greatly affected by trafficking in those areas, and sadly enough, the lowest cost of a child that I've ever heard of that's been sold for trafficking, I want to say it was $12. And that was something that I had researched and read into over a year ago, and was documented by somebody that actually went in and was doing undercover research, posing as a predator and a purchaser. And those are some of the amounts and statistics that he was able to gather, is that there's a family that's just so poor that, that $12, I saw $20 in that range all the time. They would be able to live off of that for another month and feed the rest of their children. So they had to make a decision to sacrifice one of their children to take care of themselves and the rest of their kids for another month. So, there are so many people that are forced into these circumstances, and the world just doesn't know that. We've touched on this a little bit before, but the depiction of what trafficking is very misconstrued and not properly delivered to people because of movies that you see, and then the lack of coverage of these actual incidents that take place. So no fault to other people, but now it's time for us to all do our research. And I'm thankful that I have this platform to be able to speak to people and educate them on what's really out there. So
very quickly, Kara, if I may, so clearly very, very difficult subjects. And what I've seen is, as people hear about these things, what happens is that you start doing research, right? And very quickly, you can be exposed to some very disturbing pictures, very disturbing videos.
Right.
And so I know that when you spoke to me the first time, when we started working on this together, you made some suggestions to me as to what I should be doing. And I feel that this might be the right time in this podcast before we delve deeper, because I've heard words like murder, satanic rituals, cannibalism. And so how would you advise for people who are, say, new to this, which is a really terrible way of putting it, but to people who are really hearing about this from a different source, a credible source, and therefore I'm not just going to dismiss it, but go, oh my God, maybe I should be doing some more research. What are your suggestions to people going down this path to protect themselves?
It's really hard. I know that different people have different coping mechanisms, and people process information differently. I have been entrenched into the education and gaining more knowledge for a long time. So this has been an organic, long process for me. So what I see a lot of right now is people getting overly emotional about all of this, and rightfully so. I understand the emotions that these things provoke, and I'm still triggered by things. Just when you think you've seen it all, you see more, and just when you think you've heard it all. And I can honestly say that there's so much information that's going around right now. It's very easy for people to get overwhelmed. So I would like to caution people to just find the balance of digging and researching, but at the same time, I know that those high emotions are going to drive people to just keep on digging and digging and digging. I'm no different. I feel like I need to know everything about everything before I speak on things, and so that I can properly digest the information that I have researched and downloaded. And it's a matter of understanding that this is something that's been around for a very, very long time. I mean, you look at history, and there's been child sacrifice and human sacrifice for thousands of years. So this is just I think, the worst it's ever been, ever in history. And that's due to the internet and the exposure and the demand for the material that people are purchasing through vehicles like the dark web is so heightened because of the internet. But then now you look at where we are in the world, and COVID has forced everybody indoors, and people are already, experiencing emotional distress right now because of the uncertainty of COVID and the stresses of, whether it's job loss or family members passing away because of COVID, or even just normal deaths and tragedy in the family. But then you have financial hardship, you have children that are usually not around, so you have heightened stress levels. The factors that are directly correlating to people being on the internet and utilizing that as, the internet's a weapon. It's very, very useful, and technology is amazing, but it can also be used for bad, just like anything can, And unfortunately, the predators are utilizing that because it's a direct line of access. And, they're preying on our young right now, on the children that are on electronics constantly, that are on video games, that are bored, that are looking for an outlet, and they're using it. And, with the desensitization of the nature of sex as it is, our society for decades has been morphing into this darker world of sexual activity. And now you're seeing things like, the normalization of pedophilia being considered. I'm speechless in many ways about that, but then at the same time, I have nothing but things to say about it. I'm too emotionally dealing with the fact that people are actually trying to normalize that, and that people are actually considering that to be something that's normal. And so, even as I try to caution against people allowing their emotions to heighten, like I said, I completely understand that. But I think it's a matter of, to answer your question a little more precisely, I think it's a matter of people being able to discern how much they can personally handle, and just knowing that there's a threshold for everyone. So, somebody that's been in this work, I've been doing the research for years now, but there are people that I'm working with directly that have organizations and foundations that have been doing this work for over a decade, and then even up to 25 years. So, I'm sitting with them, and we're having discussions about the work that they're doing and how it's only getting worse. And, they too have to have those outlets and make sure that they're able to function and still be able to look at, family life the same and work life the same, and know that even though there is so much evil in this world, because there really is, there really, really is, there is just as much good, if not more. So you have to really be able to understand that. And so many people, I think, with everything that's going on with COVID right now, and the economy in general, the election coming up, there's so much stress and there's so much negativity that's being pushed on people. We're seeing people getting murdered. There's very aggravated protests going on where people are hurting other people, and it's all so sad. So then you start adding in all of this information about child rape and child sex trafficking and pedophile activity, and the child sexual abuse material that's being purchased and sold online, and what has to be done to keep up with the demand of that. When you start getting into it, it's so dark and it's so evil. But so it's easy to go down that road. It's so easy to just keep going down there and getting depressed and getting into this dark place. But I encourage everyone to know that, sitting in my seat especially, I do deal with that every single day, all day. But at the same time, I'm dealing with the most amazing people that are coming together, and the other organizations that I'm working with, and the other founders and leaders that I'm talking to regularly, there is so much that we're doing to make sure that we are going to make a difference with this. There are children being rescued all the time. There are predators being arrested all the time. So I just encourage people to continue to look on the light side of things, the bright side of things, and know that there are organizations like mine that are actually making a difference, and we're doing something to change the course of this. And, you know, I've mentioned before, but there are so many people that are, you know, learning about this now and are getting involved, and I think it's the most amazing thing. But I just want people to know that this is not just something that, you know, is a phase because, you know, it's going around social media right now. This is something, we're here for the long haul. And, you know, I encourage people to, whatever avenue they choose, to find that balance, whether it's, you know, breaking away from social media for a little bit, or spending extra time with their families, or getting out into nature, whether you're going to sit and pray for a while and just, you know, ask for that strength and that clarity and discernment on what they're discovering. You know, if it's meditation, whatever it is that people do, whatever avenue of peace and grounding people utilize, you know. And if you don't, then you absolutely need to, because you can't go into this dark, evil world and dig into the information that you're going to find here without coming out a changed person. It's impossible. You will be affected. It will change you, and you will look at things much, much differently. And in many ways, it'll be good, because you'll have enough knowledge to protect your family, to protect your children a little bit better, to be more aware of your surroundings, to be more involved, you know, on in your children's social media and in their activities on their phones and their iPads and their different electronics. And maybe you can put some precautionary measures into place that you wouldn't have had there before. So I think it's an overall positive awareness that's happening, but you have to find the balance somehow, some way.
So you actually just used the word that I have found more frightening than cannibalism. The word normalizing. I mean, it's even difficult to try and associate any kind of normality with what you're talking about. So going back to the conversation and what we're trying to address today, normal is probably on the scale of something that is easily digestible, easily acceptable, and that's kind of, you know, it's the wrong word to use, but it's certainly on the lower side of things, and then it decreases from there, right?
Right.
So what is normalization? What is it that people see every day that actually makes it palpable, even though it shouldn't?
You know, it's what's been feeding society. It's the, you know, I hate to say it, but it's true. It's the movies that we see. It's the programs that our kids are watching. You know, it starts at a very young age where there are sexual connotations at such a young level of maturity that our kids are witnessing, whether it's, you know, young girls dressing inappropriately or dressing beyond their years. It's movies that are coming out. It's singers that are dancing and acting provocatively. These things are absorbed so deeply because that's all that's being pushed on our society. You know, movies, you know, even 10, 15 years ago didn't have the amount of mature content that they do now. So it, you know, and it's happened so subtly over, you know, the course of the last couple of decades. You know, we've seen somewhat of a trend building and building and building. And now it's gotten to the point where there's so much normalization of sexual material, sexual innuendos, mentioning certain things, indirectly. It's a lot of different comedians and actors joking about certain things that shouldn't be joked about. It's kind of all been sliding under the radar because they make it, so funny. So it kind of takes the awkward nature out of it. But then it becomes more and more accepted because people keep joking about it or keep mentioning it. So it's you talk about grooming, that is grooming 101. So it's like a little drip campaign. It's just been dripped, and then you just turn the faucet up a little bit more, and now there's a little stream. And then soon the faucet's just wide open, and it's just pouring out, and it's like, how do you contain it at this point? So there's so much material, and it's TV, it's movies. Everybody's glued to the TV and movies. I stopped watching the news 10 years ago. The last thing I watched was the last election. I don't watch the news because it is just that. It is programming in so many ways. They tell you exactly what they want you to know or think, and that's what you go on. Instead of us doing critical thinking and doing our own research and finding other avenues of identifying information, and over time developing, based on intuition and different facts. And it's not even just that, because I have so many people that are like, well, there's nothing proving it. Well, there are no facts. Well, even when there are facts that are presented, they're misconstrued, or the presentation isn't delivered properly. So then they're misinterpreted. So, there's so much to be said about even our judicial system and people that are not prosecuted properly. And so even though they were a convicted felon and they've been abusing children by the masses for years, they're still let go, or they still have a very lenient sentence. So I encourage everyone to do their own critical thinking, put their own puzzle pieces together. If you talk about symbolism, the way that they communicate, pedophiles especially, but then even with Satanists and the satanic ritual abuses and that whole entire world of people, they all speak using symbols. That's like their language. It's another form of their language. So when you're talking about, code words or code symbols, to have this communication, it's like, it's like hieroglyphics back in the day. If you're looking for an example, they spoke with pictures and symbols. That was their language. This is no different. So for people to outline this as a theory or a conspiracy theory, that's a little, it's like a Band-Aid for me. I feel like that's just a little Band-Aid that people are putting on it because they don't really want to acknowledge that this may be possible. This may be a reality. So if they rip off that Band-Aid of the label of conspiracy theory, and then they actually go down and do the research, and they put all the pieces together, and you still come out and you're still saying, no, there's no way, it's not possible, then I'm going to question you very, very critically and say, tell me how it's not possible. Tell me how this is not happening, because I would really like to hear from the other side. I'm open to hearing that discussion. So, I just encourage people strongly to do their research, and if you just put all of your opinions and emotions aside and you sit there and you do the research, things will start to make sense for you. And it might take some time, and that's okay, but things will absolutely start to make sense, and the things will absolutely start to fall into place. So
it's actually really interesting. I was talking to a friend this weekend, to a friend that we have in common, and we were talking about how news is digested, right? And it's, I can't remember who the actor is, who said, I think it was actually a couple of weeks ago, if you don't listen to the news, you're not informed. If you listen to the news, you're misinformed, right? Yeah. And so I was talking with our friend Melissa this weekend, and she was saying that basically you have your top layer of news, right, which is your social media, mainstream media, that is kind of very much made to manipulate how everything is digested, right?
Right.
Then you have your second level, which is then your conspiracy theories, right? And then your third level, which is people who start looking at conspiracy theories and thinking, oh my God, no, this is just not possible. And then they go back to just digesting news.
Right.
And so you always get redirected towards something that really doesn't inform you.
Right.
And you and I had spoken about the first time we did this podcast about how, yes, absolutely. I mean, I work with you on a daily basis, right? And we have conversation and certain things you share with me. Does my everyday mind go, no, that's not even possible, right? But then you go back into history, and the example we had used last time was concentration camps. 99% of the world population, including Germans, did not believe it existed.
Right.
And yet here we are, right? And
then to that point, you look at history being rewritten and how many history books don't even have that history in them anymore.
Right.
I mean, I'm around people that have children that are in middle school and high school, and they have no idea what the Holocaust even was. So
really?
Yes, it's appalling. I just sit there and I'm like, wait a minute, you don't know about that? You have no idea what that is? So you talk about misinformation, then there's the withholding of information.
Yes.
And then there's the people that don't want you to know the information. So you better believe that they're paying top dollar to make sure that that information is buried or censored. So there's so many people that are like, well, I can't find, information on that. Or I went to the link, but then it said that it's been removed. Well,
yeah,
because they don't want you seeing it. Absolutely. Like that, why would they want you to be able to find this stuff? Why would they wouldn't. They're doing absolutely everything they can to bury all of this, So it's up to us to do our due diligence and rediscover and uncover that. And, call it what you will, use the term that the CIA made up, conspiracy theory, to make it something that doesn't seem what it really is. What better way to deter people and to make them go in the opposite direction? So yes, very valid point.
What is the sentence? The devil's greatest trick is to make you believe that he doesn't exist, right? Very much aligned with that.
And his deception, he's a master deceiver.
And it's actually funny because, well, it's not funny. It's funny in terms of how you look at things. So recently with my family, we're home and we're watching the movie Big with Tom Hanks. And there's a point where this 13-year-old boy, if I remember correctly, but in the body of an adult, but still we know he's going into a bedroom to have intimate relationship with the actress playing his love interest. And the next scene is him with a big smile on his face the next morning. And it's kind of palpable because it's an adult, but at the same time, it's a 13-year-old boy in the body of an adult.
Right.
So, and he was just out there. And, as I said, the next morning, it's Tom Hanks walking around with a big smile on his face.
Right.
As an adult, but as a 13-year-old. And so, it's funny how when you actually start looking into these things and you look at things differently, you start seeing things that you didn't see before.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's been the biggest awakening for people, is that those seeds that are being planted, whether you believe them right away or not, they will grow. And I think it's just a matter of us continuing to plant those seeds. Like I posted on social media the other day, I was called crazy when I was talking about this years ago. So it's not surprising for me to be called crazy now. It doesn't bother me. I'm here to inform. I'm here to at least get the wheels turning. I'm here to encourage you to think critically and be proactive in your research. And that's what I've done. And, I might not be 100% on point with everything. That's fine with me. I would like to be proven wrong on some of these things. I hope that some of these things aren't true. But when everything's pointing that way, I'm not going to deny it either. So, oh man, I just hope that people can start picking up on those little things and putting the pieces together for nothing else but to protect themselves, protect their children, be more cautious, be more aware of the surroundings when they have their children in different places. I ran a poll on my own, and I had over 2,500 people that polled in, and 53% of people were sexually abused by someone that they knew. So it was either a family member or a friend of a family, that abused them. So even though there are so many other circumstances where there are children that are taken by strangers or abducted or trafficked to people that they don't know, so many of these abuses occur with people that you know. I have my own experience. My very first experience when I was a child being raped was by two people that I knew and I was supposed to have trusted as a child, authoritative figures that were very close to me for years. So I it's just crucial, on so many different levels. I'm trying to make sure that everyone's aware of all of these different types of abuses that fall under the umbrella of trafficking, so that they can just, whatever they can handle, they can start allowing their mind to go there and to research so that they become more aware and more educated. So ultimately, that's what this is all about.
So this is definitely a case where, as a parent, as a guardian, it is definitely so much better to be overly cautious than to think it's not going to happen, right? Because that's another huge misconception. Oh, it happens in low economical environments, etc. It's not true, right?
Well, it's not, absolutely not. And many of the stories that I hear from survivors are that it's just the opposite. It happens in very affluent communities, and that's because that's where people don't look. So just as much as it's happening in lower economic communities that suffer, in different ways, there are so many children that are trafficked, in parties, sex parties, and they're taken to these places, these big, huge, beautiful mansions where people are dressed to the nines, laughing and joking, talking amongst themselves, drinking wine and champagne. And then minutes later, everyone is naked, and there are adults, grown adults and couples forcing children to have sex with them and do sexual acts. And there are groups of children, 4, 6, 8 years old, and everywhere in between. It's really hard. You talk about children, but it's not even just children. It's toddlers and infants. And people are going to shake their head and they're going to turn the other way and they're going to say, nope, I've had enough. That's not true. I don't believe it. How is that even physically possible? It is. I promise you. There are cases that are of actual murders because of the abuses and traumas that infants suffered through that rape. They actually they pass away due to their injuries. So it happens, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to do something about it. And I'm here to do that, and I'm not going anywhere. We're fighting the fight.
And so, so we can take this out of the podcast if it's too difficult. I was talking to my daughter yesterday. She's 27, just came back from 5 years in Japan. And so she was looking at this post on Twitter that I was going through this weekend. That was the latest sex toy, if you will, coming out of Japan. And it's something that's shaped like a donut that has 7 different reproduction of the female organ. And with a picture next to it. And what people didn't understand, because it was written in Japanese, is the fact that it was actually exactly the same woman, but at different stages of her life, starting at the age of 13. Literally, you can buy this in Japan, mainstream, a sex toy that reproduces the vaginal or the female reproductive organ at the age of 13.
Well, on that note, there are sex dolls that are being sold, and I can't remember if it was, I think, I want to say it was the same Chinese website that sells adrenochrome. I think it's Alibaba, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
They're selling child sex dolls. So they're actual sex dolls that are children. Their bodies are shaped like children. Their faces are children. It's this is why we're here. I think, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I would like our next Zoom or podcast, whether it be here in the studio or this way, I'm going to address the porn industry and how it directly feeds the sex trafficking industry.
Mhm.
So, I don't even like calling it an industry, but it is, and it's an illicit
Right.
enterprise, but
Absolutely.
it's a business, and I'm talking to the founder of another organization, and we're looking at partnering at some level to shine light on the porn industry's affiliation and how it directly correlates to the sex trafficking industry. So we're working on that right now. We just communicated this morning, so we're going to dive into that partnership a little bit more over the next few weeks and really highlight all of that information. She's been fighting that fight for a while now. So and she's made a lot of progress, but I feel that we all have to come together and shine even more light on that. Every angle that we can attack this, we're doing it.
So, as you say, we don't want to take a lot more time. I want to believe, because that's the way it actually has been happening in my life since we've been talking, is, once you start actually believing that all of this is possible, right? And so you kind of feel a responsibility to start sharing with other people. And
Right.
what happens is, more fun than not, it's actually not disbelief, but in many cases, people start sharing their own experiences they've had. And that can be really difficult because, talk about being left speechless. You think that you're just sharing something with someone, and then they start telling you, well, actually, I was molested when I was 12. Or,
Right.
so what do you do in that case? Because clearly, for you get, as a responsible, or even as a human being, you kind of want to do something about it. But it's something that requires special skills, right, to be able to really address and be of help. So what is the best way, if somebody starts talking to you and opening up, to actually help them?
I actually did a podcast with a survivor last week, and unfortunately we had a podcast studio malfunction. The mic wasn't completely plugged in, so we lost our whole podcast. But we addressed that specifically. So I'll touch on that, and then when I have her come back in, we're going to redo that same podcast to answer that question very in depth, because I think there's a lot to it. And coming from a survivor's standpoint, she had great insight to share with the severity of the trauma that she's endured. But ultimately, the best thing to do is to never cancel out the possibility that every single one of those things happened, because a lot of times a lot of people point the finger and they say, oh, there's no way that could have happened. They're in denial, they're lying, because they don't actually think that the person that was the predator or the attacker could have actually done that to them, or they're just such a nice person. Well, predators are master manipulators. So they will do whatever it takes to prey. So they are absolutely talented at deceiving the people that need to be deceived in order to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So it's the people that you wouldn't suspect that are. So that's something to keep in mind too, which then tells you that you need to start questioning everybody. And why wouldn't you? You should be. Don't trust anybody, especially not with your children.
Right.
They're so vulnerable, so vulnerable. So people know people for years and they had no idea that they were a sex offender or a pedophile. So I just tell you to proceed with caution on every level. But for the people that are coming forward saying that they've been sexually abused or have suffered some type of sexual violence, the best thing you could do is listen. And I mean, truly listen, active listening, compassion, love. Whether or not you believe it, the best way to support a fellow human being that has been through something that tragic on any level is to listen. And the survivor that I had in here speaking about her story, she said that's the one thing that she hasn't received from people, is that people don't really listen, or they don't want to know, or they don't want to hear, or it's too much for them. In many cases that might be reality, but I'm hoping that with everything that's coming to light right now, people they'll be able to tolerate more, and they'll be able to build up more of a backbone through processing all of this information that's circulating right now. And they'll be able to be a sounding board for people that have been, victimized and that have been abused. So that would be the number one thing, and then, I think that another podcast should be, how do you identify victims of sexual abuse? How do you identify victims of sex trafficking? And then what to do about it. I think that should be one of our next ones, absolutely, to go into that a little bit more, to give people the education and the tools that they need to not only observe certain things, but then to notify the correct people and to do something about it, so that we can put an end to it, whatever's happening. So.
And so, if it's an active situation, I don't know, I'm talking to friends saying, you know what, now they say talk about it, I think my neighbor's kid, something might be going on. What is the procedure there? Is it better to call the authorities? Is it better to call an organization? How would you recommend to get help?
I think every circumstance is going to be different. And I think that's where it's challenging certain times, because you want to make sure that you're protecting the child, that they're not going to be put into harm's way even further if you are to expose them. But there are signs that you can see, whether they are depressed, they don't make eye contact, they don't respond when they're asked questions or spoken to, they have physical harm, you can see bruises, cuts, scrapes on their body. A lot of times these children are so traumatized that they don't eat. So you can start seeing, malnutrition, or they might be losing weight, or they might be overeating. So there's a rapid weight gain. They're not social. There are definitely signs to see these things. If you're concerned, there are different organizations. You can contact law enforcement. I want to open the door for people to reach out to me. You can contact me, on my website, salvationfoundation.com. You can go on there, and I have an 800 number where you can call me. You can also send me an email. That's on my website as well. There are different organizations. You can contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I contact them regularly. So I have people that are sharing messages with me all day, every day. And it's sexual exploitation, or it's, excuse me, profiles on social media where they believe that pedophiles are running the account, or there's pedophilia that's circulating through the account. We report all of those to NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The FBI, on bigger circumstances, local law enforcement. We're working with law enforcement to make sure that they're very well aware of what happens. So we all know that these activities take place, but it's now creating the curriculum to educate all law enforcement agents, first responders, doctors, nurses, medical staff, et cetera, on things to look for and how to truly handle victims and survivors of these types of situations, because they have to be addressed with a very fragile nature. So, law enforcement would be my first recommendation. Other organizations that are local that currently help victims of trafficking and sexual and child abuse, whether it's sexual in nature or it's a domestic abuse situation. There are many different organizations, and one of the things that we're doing right now is we're redoing our entire website to cater more to that information, so that people have those resources and those tools that they can use.
Wonderful.
So there are a lot of shifts and growth changes that we're making right now, just with the abundance of information that's out there and the amount of people that are really trying to get involved right now. You know, this isn't something that I've ever seen before. So we're really trying to make sure that we have those tools that are available to the public to get more involved so that we can continue the momentum that we have in protecting these children.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kara.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wanted to address?
You know, not during this episode. I know that I said that we were going to do one a week, but we're looking at 2 to 3 a week at this point.
Okay.
There's no better time than now for people to become aware, and that's what I'm here to do. So tune into the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and Francois, thank you for joining me on this one. I really appreciate your insight and your questions.
And Kara, thank you so much for, you know, kind of leading the charge and being courageous where a lot of us just, you know, kind of maybe are a little too scared to go too deep. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.